All right, well, here we are again. We are Strengths Conversations with Brent and Jeff every Wednesday at 3:30. There's a fly zooming around my office, so if I inadvertently clap my hands, it's just me trying to claim my space and teach that guy a lesson. Today we're going to talk about Activator, the Strength of Activator. You know, activators are, I'll just summarize what I know of activators, and I certainly feel like this is in my top. It's not in my top 5, but I certainly identify with it because it's this restlessness of let's get started. We've talked long enough. We need to get going, right? And I think, Thomas, are you here because you've got Activator in your world?
I am. That's my number 2.
Yeah, and Lauren, it's her number 2 as well. I think she said individualization and Activator, and then maximizer. So it's in hers. Brent, do you get Activator in your world?
It doesn't show up in my top 10, but I'm not the most patient person. So I know I identify with kind of the impatience part of an activator strength.
Yeah, like I certainly get that. Like we've talked long enough, let's get going. So I guess the way we should start is, let's start with you, Lauren, if you would. Describe what you see Activator in your life and how you see it, and where do you notice it most?
I would say in the past, we're collaborating like with other students in a group. I am probably the one that takes initiative to just start like doing something. Whether it's like brainstorming or anything like that. Like I don't like sitting in like silence in group settings. I find that really awkward. So even in just a social sense too, like I'm not super outgoing necessarily, somewhere in between like extrovert and introvert, but I will, like, to avoid silence, I will go up to somebody and like introduce myself and make conversation with them.
So are you finding that just extra challenging during the COVID Zoom world, because there's so many awkward beginnings of meetings and classes where people are just kind of sitting around doing the Brady Bunch, like,
Yep.
or not paying attention at all and just, kind of like.
Yeah, looking down. Yeah, I find that challenging, and in breakout rooms especially too, where everybody just sits like muted. I don't know if you guys have experienced breakout rooms yet.
Oh, for sure. For sure. We've experienced that same thing. Like, okay, who's supposed to start the conversation here? How do we get this going? Thomas, how do you see Activator in your world? Would you describe it the same, or is there any other moments where you're like, let me describe what I see about Activator?
I like getting stuff off the ground. I like making things that don't exist, getting them started, but then I find that I get bored once they're up and running. So,
right? Okay. I think that's a real challenge. One of the pieces of advice that I coach people with Activator is you need to find really good follow-through partners, right? Like, who are the people that have focus, strategic, achiever, that they're the ones that are like, okay, Thomas, thanks for getting us started, but I got to keep us on track. I got to keep us on our plan. Here's the to-do list that we got to cross off, because I think I'm similar in that same way then, Thomas, that okay, we got it started. Great. All right, I'm moving on to the next project because I got it started. You guys should keep going. Is that what you were describing?
Right. Yeah, I think in a sense, definitely.
Yeah. So that's a good point though, and that's, I think, with Lauren and with everybody who's an activator that you work with, finding the partners and the strengths that complement that is really important, right? Because what you bring to the group is this, let's get going. I want to get it started. And by the way, I created a spreadsheet, and you know, I got the plan all written down because I wanted to get it to that point, but now I'm bored with it and I'm ready to move on to the next thing to get started. I like how both Lauren and Thomas are shaking their heads like this, like, yep, all right, yep. What do you think, Brent?
Yeah, I think a thing, especially as you talk in like groups and everything, one of the things that you're talented at is like turning thoughts into action. So if you're in a group setting, how do you make those group settings action oriented? And think about like maybe you're just rephrasing what someone says and like asking the question, is this the next step we need to take? Who wants to take that on? It might be you volunteering to take that step if you're excited about it, or it might be a step that you can't take depending on your role in the group. So I think really focusing on like, I know what these thoughts are and I know the action we might need to take, but not everyone thinks that way. So understanding that you might need to bring people along in some of those conversations to the action that you already have going on in your head.
You know, to take that one step farther, Brent, activators are like, we need somebody in meetings to say, okay, this meeting's wrapping up, or we're wrapping up this gathering. Can we talk through real quick the action steps needed to take? Like, who's doing what, so that we can make sure we're not coming back to another meeting where we're going to talk about what we need to do, but nobody's done anything in the last week. Because I don't know, Lauren, you're just getting into this, but I know Thomas and I and Brent all come to lots of meetings, and then, you know, we walk out of the meeting going, well, that was great. I wonder who's doing anything, because we don't know who's doing what. Well, we need the activators to kind of say like, wait, the meeting's not over until we know what we're doing during this week off. And it's something that you want, right? You don't want the inaction of the week to go by. So it's important for you to see that through.
Well, and I know for me, like meetings where, because I'm an achiever, I know there are times where I come into a meeting with such a long list that I'm like, okay, I need to be active in this meeting and crossing some of this off my list. So if there's something in addition put on my list, there are times where I'm like drafting that email mid-meeting just to be sure that it gets done and it happens so I don't forget. So I think just like recognize that other people aren't always going to be at that action quite yet. And it's still like an action might be, even for those strategic thinkers, because I'm one of those too, like an action might be that there's a separate meeting of a smaller group of people to like figure out the next steps. And you might be invited into some of those actions. So I think it kind of just depends on the context of the situation that you're going through.
Yeah, I wonder what the strategy would be for, I don't know the answer to this, so maybe Thomas, you and Lauren need to chime in on this. You ever feel like your ideas are the right ones, and we're like, let's go, we're there, we've discussed it enough, and now we got to be ready to just move forward? Because I think that's maybe a barrier or a challenge for somebody with activator. I know that I think for me, it's probably a combination of my activator and command, because I'm more than willing to screw up, right? Like I'm more than willing to go forward and make a mistake, because I'd rather see movement than stagnation. What do you think about that?
I think I find myself somewhere in the middle of those two. Like, I like to get things going, obviously, since I'm an activator, but I do like to make sure that I'm doing it like right, in a sense, that I have everything mapped out. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, that might be your maximizer stepping in there too, right? Because you've got maximizer who's also like, we're going to be efficient and we're going to do it the best we can do it, and there's an efficiency related to that. What about you, Thomas? Do you find yourself in that let's get started, and if we make a mistake we can go back and fix it, but I'd rather...
Yes, definitely. And command is my number 3 too. So
okay, so you and I both sit with that You know, people with command are more than willing to do that as well. Like, let's screw it up. Let's screw it up really well. It's fine.
In my personal life, the way that this has manifested itself is that Haley's biggest pet peeve, my wife Haley's biggest pet peeve is starting to drive somewhere without knowing where we're going. So if it's like, you know, let's go get something to eat, and I start driving, it's like, no, we gotta know exactly where we're going before the car can even be put into drive. So I like that story, Jeff.
Yeah, no kidding. It's the we'll figure out where we're going once we get there.
Right. Either way, we'll be going in the right direction. But.
Either way, we'll be going in there. We'll be going in a direction. That's hilarious. And such a true activator statement, right? Okay, so as these conversations go, we want to talk about people to work with. I think focus and strategic are two strengths that, like I said before, I think are really important. Find people with that. I would also say achievers or anybody else who has like great organization skills might be really, really helpful. I don't like to talk about people to avoid working with, but I would challenge, I think people with high adaptability and activator might be a struggle. You want to make sure you're having a good conversation about that, because you might be so willing to start something and then change course. You're always doing this and you're never getting to the final goal because you're just, well, let's start and change. Like Thomas was like, I'm not so great on the follow through. I'm like, let's get it started. Well, if you're partnered with somebody who has high adaptability, you might not ever get there. You might find yourself working really hard and not going anywhere. But achiever is a really good one. And didn't you say, Lauren, you had achiever?
Yep.
So you can cross, you can say activator check, let's get started. But then my achiever gets to go into checklist mode and start checking things off the checklist, writing it down. So I think that's a really important about partnerships. I think when we want to talk about succeeding in academics, because I think that's really important. One of the suggestions that I always tell students is make sure you're connecting with professors to make sure you understand expectations and timelines, because you are more than willing to get things going and get things started, but you want to make sure you're going in the right direction. So that's real important, especially if you're trying to work ahead, which a lot of activators do naturally. They want to work ahead. You want to make sure you're not skipping so far ahead that you end up doing work needlessly that ends up being corrected later on in a future class, And I suppose, Thomas, that follows along lines with, the work life as well, right? Make sure you work with your supervisor to make sure if you're starting a project, that's the project that they want to have started, or else you find yourself spending a couple days working on something and then going, oh, yep, probably shouldn't have done that. We're in the wrong direction.
It's about 75% of my time, Jeff.
Yeah. Going in the wrong direction. At least you're going, man.
Well, and I think there's a good analogy that I was reading through that, like, activators, they're ready to like shoot, and they might not necessarily have that aim yet. So as you think of like your strategic partners, like folks with strategic thinking, folks who can help you like hone ideas and like have a focus of whatever that project is, whatever you're doing, like that's going to help you make sure you're reaching whatever that goal is or achievement or project. Because you're like, you've got the gun loaded and you're doing target practice already, but being sure that you have that focus partner to kind of help you get where you're needing to go.
Yeah. Some of the advice to chime into that is, work really quickly on your first draft and get your first draft in quickly, because you'll get feedback from that and you'll know if I'm going in the right direction right away. And it's okay to get, your first draft is just that. It's just the first one, but you'll be the first one to get feedback. So that's really strong advice, I think. And then it's okay to be the leader of like your academic group. So putting together study groups, putting together discussion groups, other people will be relieved that you've taken the charge because they want somebody to take charge of that. And it's okay to be that person that says, I'll get us started, but like Thomas was saying, I need to partner with other people. Once we're together, I need somebody else to kind of be the strategic moving forward person.
But
I think you will absolutely find people relieved that you're doing it.
Well, and I think too, like just recognizing too how your activator strength probably gets those projects going, like taking time to reflect on like, well, if I wouldn't have spoke up then, or if I didn't say this, or if I didn't, you know, schedule that meeting, like those steps, however small you might think they are, they can be huge into being sure that that project happens a week earlier, or, you know, that task gets done sooner. So I think recognizing too how that is helpful, not just in the context of your own work, but especially with your work with others. I'm sure your colleagues and peers that you work with recognize that. They may not always verbalize that, but they recognize that you're the one who's kind of the impetus for things starting.
Yeah. So we always want to talk too about, you know, choosing and working into careers. One of the things I would recommend, and Lauren, as you're just embarking on this path, now is a great time for you to try out lots of part-time jobs and try. What is your major, Lauren? What are you going to be? What's your plan?
I don't have one.
Okay, perfect. So this is absolutely perfect then, because you get to try out lots of part-time jobs, right? And try lots of different things, because activators are good at starting. So let's go get started and we'll try something and be willing to change course quickly. Things that you're trying to do though to maximize your activator is think about projects or places to work that have a lot of starts, right? Like a lot of things that were like, oh, we're going to do something new today. Oh, we're going to do something new today. I think that's really a thing for you to think of as you're applying for different part-time jobs. And then the other thing is, because you're going to be trying out all these things, is figuring out what kind of supervisors you work well for. Because at some point you're going to apply for a full-time job and somebody's going to ask you this question: what do you need in a supervisor? What do you need in a manager? You know, how can I support you the best? And activators absolutely need to find the right mix. Because if Thomas didn't have the supervision that let him start 75% of the time and go in the wrong direction, that would be a real struggle. But he has somebody who supports him and says, go ahead, let's get started. Nope, not the way I want to go, but at least you got it going, right?
When I think in that career advice too, like as you're looking for roles, like try to find roles if possible that give you that autonomy to, you know, to start new things, to like learn from mistakes, like, and then also like, I know it suggests too, as I was doing some reading, like even if there are some like startup companies or like new companies that you could work for, that might be something that really feeds your activator, because there's a lot of things that need to get started and you can be the impetus for a lot of different projects happening in that context. Right.
That's a great advice, Brent. Great vision there. What do you think, Thomas, as we've been talking about this now for 22 minutes? Has this helped you think about your activator at all?
Yeah, I think it has. I think the best metaphor that I've heard for this is thinking about the amount of energy that it takes a rocket to get off the ground for the first 100 feet, and how you're not really making it that far, but it takes a ton of energy to just get that initial lift off. And so that's how I think about this strength and a lot of the ways that I try to use it.
Yeah, Jim Collins writes in a Good to Great, if you get a chance to read that. He writes about it as the flywheel principle, that the amount of energy it takes to get a flywheel started is a whole bunch of energy, but once the energy gets going, it kind of manages itself. And activators are the ones that they get thrill off of doing the early push, spending that energy on that. What do you think, Lauren? We've talked now. Give us your assessment. Has this been helpful?
Yeah, it has. I just think, I mean, in a broader sense, I think it's really interesting how you guys have been talking about how strengths translate to like a group setting, I guess. And I think since I've really only worked with my strengths for like 2 weeks or so, I've really only applied them to myself and reflected on how they might translate to my own personality and how I affect others, not really like how others affect me and what I don't know, get out of like a job or yeah, just even beyond school. So
well, what a neat opportunity that's going to be for you to navigate this for the next couple of years then, as you are deciding what your vocation's going to be, and as you get into more decisions of that, you know, to take it and go, where will my strengths lie, right? Where will I be able to use, because I think I got 4 of them: individualization, activator, maximizer, achiever, and then I can't remember what the 5th one was. Was that like learner?
yeah. Yep.
You know, how do you get all of those into an alignment to where you're like, this would be a great career. I could do all of these things, and it fulfills one of my passions, right? It's like I get to use all of these, plus I'm passionate about something. Once you can get those things in alignment, then it's not really work anymore, because then you just get to go and do what you enjoy doing all the time.
I think another thing you can think about is like the whole point of strengths is like using a common language. So whether that's like with your groups, like just being able to express, this is a strength that I'm good at and I'm willing to like take that on in my team.
Yeah.
Like you can kind of be the impetus for how people are able to communicate what they're good at. And that can also help, that can just help you like in the group projects that you're working on. And then also just in, you know, the jobs, part-time jobs, whatever you're doing that you take on. If you're the one starting to express those things, that can also activate other people to recognize what they're good at and how they can contribute in new and different ways.
Yeah. Very cool. I'm so glad you guys were here today. Lauren, I'm going to make sure you get credit for attending. I'll put it in right now. I'll put it into Viking Central so you get that. We are back every Wednesday at the same time. And next week, we're going to be talking about harmony. So those people, as a preview, harmony, one of my favorite stories was a VA that we had who disliked arguments so much and disliked conflict so much. He said, it's a total sickness. I'm willing to lie to people to make sure that they don't argue with each other. Like, no, they never said that. No, that's not what they wanted. So it's such a great attribute because you're so trying so hard to bring the world into balance. So that's what we're going to talk about next week, is how do we bring the world into balance, which, what a great time to be talking about that. So any further questions or comments there, Brent?
I don't think so.
I just want to just quickly to Lauren's thing. I think what was helpful for me is shortening the time period about which I was thinking about the world, right? So like the next 4 years, you have a chance to do a lot of things, start a lot of things, get involved with a lot of things, and that will lead itself likely to opportunities after graduation. So I just think as an activator, I couldn't think 4 years ahead, sitting where you are, about like, oh, I'll just wait 4 years and then start a career, right? Like just start doing stuff, and then that will open opportunities, or you'll figure out what you're really good at doing or starting or fixing. At least that was my experience. So just maybe like tightening up your mental time frame on how you're thinking about things.
Yeah, I like that. Thank you.
Fantastic.
Yeah, that's great advice.
Good advice, Thomas. Thank you for adding that. Thank you guys all for being here today. Next week, we're going to talk harmony. Take care of yourself. Take care of each other.
See ya.
Talk to you soon.
Thank you both.
Bye.